Good morning. Welcome to a Monday morning episode of Tea, Coffee, and Torah. This morning, I want to share some thoughts with you regarding one of the very first blessings that we can find in Scripture. It's a blessing with a promise, and the question that I have found among people who believe in the Bible is whether this is a blessing or a command or both. So we'll tackle some of those issues, or at least discuss them. I find that I have talked before in the previous episodes about how each of us can become messiahs and how we don't need to put off to tomorrow what we can do today. The Torah is really an I can religion. It's a call to action. It's something that each and every one of us can do in our lives. And it is how we become a strong people. Now, you will notice I was running late this morning, and the reason I was running late actually kind of dovetails into what I would want to talk about today. So, if you'll join me for a cup of tea. This is still coffee. I haven't gotten into my tea yet. Yesterday I had Rublios, but this morning I'm back to a good old cup of Joe. So the very first blessing that God gave to Abraham was not wealth, it wasn't strength, power, or even land. I know we think it's land, but it wasn't even land. And his first blessing wasn't even the knowledge of truth. The very first blessing that God gave to Abraham was children. It was people. You can't have a family, a religion, or a nation without people. Even truth for us here on earth is pretty much meaningless unless there are people to imbibe those ideas, people to share those ideas, and people who embrace those ideas. So everything really hinges on people. And how do we get people? Pretty simple. We have children. So the children are our legacy. And without children, without a future, it's pretty much hopeless. So let's just delve into the text. We're going to look at Genesis 12:2. And this is what Yahweh promises to Abraham. It says, I will make you a great nation in the land that he will show him. I will bless you and make your name great, and you will be a blessing. Well, notice that unless Abraham has children, his name is never going to become great. You know, the reason why Abraham's name is great today, and the reason why everybody pretty much knows when you talk about the biblical Abraham, who he is for one reason. It's because Ishmael became a large and populous nation. Today, there's a huge religion built in his name and built, among his descendants. Same with Judaism and Christianity. All three of the world's main faiths today, I mean, there are lesser faiths, but the big faiths that have pretty much dominated the social sphere over the past 1,000 years have been founded on an Abrahamic faith. And it is because of his children, because his children have become as the stars of heaven and the sands of the seashore. That is why why that faith has been passed on, why those values and those ideas have passed on. So you notice that every single promise in Scripture, every blessing, every promises of prosperity, it all begins with one thing, and that is children. When I have been to churches and synagogues where the members, say, of the church are in their 60s and 70s, and there are no young families. The one thing you know about that church is that it's dying. It will not be around in another 10, 15 years because you don't have the young people growing up who are going to replace the older people. I visited a friend in Manhattan, and as we walked along the streets, we went to go see the memorial for the World Trade Centers. And as we passed, so this was an older gentleman, he was showing me, he's like, yeah, this used to be a synagogue, and it's shut its doors because it no longer has its members. Everybody's either died, they passed on, or they're no longer religious. But like some of the synagogues were actually being converted into mosques. So, but one of the big issues is that we simply are not embracing this Abrahamic blessing. When you go to Genesis 15:5, the promise that Yahweh gives to Abraham, he says, look into the sky, look towards heaven, and tell me if you can number the stars of heaven. And as those stars are, so shall your seed be. So every single promise that we have in Scripture begins not with wealth or power, but it begins with kids. And those kids actually are what give us the strength and the power. Now, that's why I was late this morning. I was actually helping my daughter with my 4-month-old grandson. He's teething right now. And so I always try to put family first. I'm not always good at that because I try to meet deadlines as well. So it's a balancing act. But I want to share some ideas with you as to not only why this is important. I've said, the one thing that Christians and Jews are encouraged not to do is mix politics with religion. And part of that is because we have a history of conflict and division. But I think the other part of that is that people know that there's more to the text than meets the eye, as far as if we could all agree on some few basic principles, some ideas, that we will become so strong. And they fear that. They fear a united people. They fear a people that share the same ideals, the same hopes, and the same goal. Because guess what? When you are united on moral values and on beliefs, people can't take that away from you. They can't steal it. And that is something that can change the world. It enables each of us to become a Messiah and to make a change for the difference. Now, notice too that in God's blessing of people, that we are really the fulfillment of that. You and I, having, just being here, as well as our children, we fulfill that Abrahamic blessing. So one of the questions that I do get is it a blessing or is it a command? And here's my question. If the Abrahamic blessing is a sign that God is with you, if it is a sign, a manifestation of what Yahweh is doing in your life, if you deny that, then it is an act of rebellion. It's an act of rebellion against God, not to embrace the promises and the blessings that he's given us. But I think it's more than that. It really comes down to common sense. In our affluence, in our prosperity that we have, where we can we aren't dependent on our children really for anything. We can go to the grocery store and buy food. We can go to go get clothes from a clothing store. And our children don't necessarily have the utility. And, we've been taught to look at utility as a bad thing, which I don't think it is. When we had utility of our children and they contributed to our lives and furthered our future, that right there made us value them all the more. Today, children have become very disposable. We get to choose whether we want them or not. And I think this is a real travesty in our society because we don't invest in the future. We've lost our common sense. We've lost our sense of self-preservation, which comes with children. Because when you produce more children than what you are as a population today, you're growing, you're thriving, you have a future, your economy is growing. In my first book, Yahweh Exists, Volume 1, I talked about how the very first Abrahamic covenant promised children and how you have to have a rate of 2.11 children per family just to replace your current population. And when you fall underneath this, you begin to wither as a society. You begin to contract rather than grow. Now, for those of you that follow Elon Musk on X, you know that he has two big platforms, two big issues that he supports. Number one is freedom of speech. And the number one is he is really sounding the warning about this population collapse that we are having here in America, as well as the West. So what I would like to talk about both today and in our next episode is what you and I, each of us, can do to reverse this. Now you might say, oh, I'm beyond childbearing age, or maybe I haven't found a mate. That doesn't necessarily limit us. I want to talk about practical things that each of us can do. I'm not going to get into that episode. We're actually going to delve into that on Wednesday. But I do want to share some statistics with you as we go through this. And, you know, it isn't just Musk that is sounding the warning to the West. It is a lot of people who study demographics, a lot of people who study history, because we do have an issue. We have become so self-focused. We have become so concerned about our own future, our own economic standing, that we're not really willing to roll up our sleeves and do the hard things that our parents did. And not so much our parents, because I don't know about you, but you know, the boomer generation was kind of the generation that began to get kind of lazy. But I look at my grandparents and what they were willing to do, the hard work and the effort that they were willing to do. And also, they had something we didn't. They had communities that came together and they worked together. You know, today the Amish are really good at this. They support each other. They help build the future together as a community. And I think there's a lot that we can learn. So we are going to unpack this as the week progresses. Next time, I wanted to keep this short this morning, but next time we're going to get into some of the statistics as to why this is important and bring this home. Because I think the question that we always end up, the place that we always end up in this discussion is, what does it mean to me? What does it mean today? And what can I do? And when we can answer those questions with practical applications, that's when we begin to take a step forward. That is when we begin to make a change and we begin to make a difference for ourselves, for our families, and for our future. So, you know, and if I had a tagline that we would do with this, good morning, Jerry, by the way, if I had a tagline that I would do with this, I would say, let's make America righteous again. Because you can't be great unless you're righteous. Any greatness comes from being righteous. So join me again next time. Now, I will try for 9:30 on Wednesday, and depending on the grandkids, hopefully I'll make it. So have a great morning, and I hope you'll delve into the text of Genesis 12 and Genesis 15, because we're going to start from there next time. Have a great day.